All right. We are back with Josh Peck, co-author of the book Afterlife, number one new release on Amazon in the science and religion genre. So we just would talked. If you haven't seen yet, go to part one, and it's a very interesting conversation about Josh's former New Age life and astral projection. And it's actually a really good segue into talking about you guys had some really good, solid stories in there about near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences, and we touched on that a little bit. So we can just touch on it real quick and then go on. But one of the things I found interesting in that was a lot of people, I mean, I had people, I was telling them about these, and I've heard of them before, and they're like, well, how do you know that they're real, that really happened? And I'm like, well, a lot of times medical doctors will back that up and say, so a lot of times people will even see their loved ones in the emergency room. Oh, you were sitting here and you were praying, and this is specifically what you said, or you were crying and saying this, or the doctors were standing here, the nurses were standing here. So there is a lot of documentation to back up that people's spirits leave their bodies. And what happens when they've left, these particular ones, they went to heaven and they said that they saw Jesus. And what's even cooler about this that I want to talk to you about is the fact that they saw their relatives, and not only the relatives they knew here on earth, but their ancestors that had come before them. And one of the things I thought was so awesome, because I'm a very family oriented person, is that they said that God, family is important to God. That's one of the things they got out of this. So can you expound on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it makes total sense that family is important to God because he created a family. I mean, he created the human race. And for what other reason but to have a family? And same with the angels, too, because he wanted a family. And so I fully believe that. And what we did in the book, we took some of the most convincing, scientifically evidenced cases of near-death experiences to include in the book. So this isn't just, not to diminish anybody's experience, but
Sure.
this isn't just, somebody said this one thing and they said they saw this, and because some of those experiences are really profound for people, and just sometimes people have near-death experiences and they don't have any scientific evidence to back it up, but they know that it happened. And so we're not discounting any of those. It's just we wanted to write a book that's not only for Christians, but that's for anybody who picks it up. So,
Sure.
scientifically minded atheists, they're going to be able to get something out of this book. And so we included some of those. There is one story, for example, where this woman, she was in the hospital and she had a near-death experience, and she was actually able to see the doctors bring the crash cart in. The doctors were calling the instruments, what they were. She had no medical background whatsoever. But they were calling the medical equipment by the name, pass the, whatever.
Sure.
And she was seeing all this, and not only hearing it, but actually seeing it. Her eyes during the experience, her eyes were closed. So if somebody tried to say, well, this was just a trick of her mind, how did she see it? Because when she came out of it, they brought her back. She came out of it. She was actually able to point to the specific medical instruments that were still in the room, and she was able to identify what each one was.
Oh, wow.
So, I could
anybody who's been in in surgery, there's no way you can stay awake with those drugs.
Yeah, you're
they'll
out.
tell you to count. They'll tell you to count to 3, and you're like 1 and done. I mean, those drugs will knock you flat out. So
yeah, I'm not sure if she was on anesthesia, because I don't know. I don't think she was in for surgery.
Oh, gotcha.
It was like a medical emergency. She had
Gotcha.
I think she was the one that had a heart attack, and she had flatlined.
Gotcha.
But still, even through a heart attack, you're not
right.
Once you're out, you're out. But somebody might say, well, she heard what the doctors were saying, and her mind just kind of pieced together the scenario. But it doesn't explain how she was able to see, actually see it, identify the instruments, know what they look like, how they operate. And all of this was recorded by the doctors. And, most doctors aren't going to be coming at this from a Christian perspective, So to actually have scientific, medical doctors recording this as fact, was amazing, because they have to record this stuff. So that was one, and that, as amazing as that is, that's probably the most boring that we have in the book.
Right. For sure.
Yeah, we put several in there. There was another one where this woman, again, some medical emergency. She had to be rushed to the hospital. She was in her hospital room and she flatlined, and the way she describes it, she felt herself rise up, and she could kind of look, she could turn around, she'd see her body, see the doctors, and so she started rising up through the ceiling, and she said she went up 3 floors, and she looked, something caught her eye. She looked and saw this window, and on the windowsill there was this little kid's shoe.
Yeah.
And this is like 3 stories up. So she was like, what is that doing there? And she was able to see it, and she was so close to it. She was able
there
to
was
see
a rip. There was a rip in the pinky toe, I think, too, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a rip in the pinky toe, and it was placed where the shoelaces were underneath the shoe. So she was close enough to be able to see these details, and she thought, oh, that was odd, and so she just remembered that. So when she came back, she had actually insisted that her social worker. Oh, and part of it too. Actually, I think this was the other lady. The other lady, part of that story. It was one of these, and no. It was the one with the shoe. She had sorry.
No, you're fine.
She had, while this was happening, she had heard the doctors, before she lifted up, she had heard the doctors admit that they had made a mistake during trying to bring her back.
Right.
Yeah. And so when she came back, so she had a social worker to work with, because she had claimed that she heard the doctors say they made a mistake, and there should have been no way that she could do. But she had insisted that the social worker go and find the shoe, and maybe it was to prove that the out of body experience was to prove that she heard the doctors say what they say. But so the social worker, she had to go up to the 3rd floor. And the shoe was on the outside, so you could look through the window and see it on the windowsill, but the windowsill itself was on the outside. And the way that it was recorded, because there was actually a philosophy professor that was doing research into this stuff, and he went and checked this story out too. And he was very skeptical. He had every reason to try to debunk this, and he even said that you can't see the shoe from the street. You would not be able to see the shoe from any of the other buildings, because it would have been too far away, especially in the detail that she described it. And you wouldn't even be able to see the details that she described just from the window, looking out. Like, the only way you could pick out all these details is to see it from the top down. That's the only way. And the way that the roof was, like, you wouldn't have been able to look over the roof and look down, because it wasn't situated in that way. And so they compiled all this evidence to suggest that she must have seen it. The social worker checked the shoe out. She went and recovered it, and it was exactly the way that this woman said it was. So multiple witnesses. It would be one thing if it was something where, maybe the social worker was working with the woman somehow, and but there with this philosophy professor, there were multiple witnesses to this thing, and there's just no way that she could have known. She was in, here's the other part too. She was in Seattle where this happened. She had never been there before. There was no record of her ever being in Seattle. She was going there for work. And she just had to fly in for a day and then leave or something like that. She'd never been there, never been to that hospital before. She wouldn't even have known to look for this shoe, There's no way that she could have known any of this. And what would she have had to gain? I mean,
right.
The only thing, the claim that the doctor screwed up, but that she couldn't have known that was going to happen. She couldn't have known.
Right.
And so there's amazing stories like that. So we included all of those, and even some of the weirder ones, in this book, to show that there is scientific reason to believe that something beyond what our mind can produce is actually happening here.
Exactly. I mean, and then you guys, even what I like about the book too is you guys actually go into, it's interesting to know what other cultures believe. And I mean, you guys go into the Egyptian underworld beliefs and how that came about, which is interesting, because when I was reading it, I was like, it makes you wonder, where did they get their, you know what I mean? How did their beliefs come up? How did they develop? I mean, because their system of what's in the underworld and what you have to do to prepare for it, and when you get there, how you can, go one way or the other, and it depends on, what's sent with you and all that. So, it's been a really fascinating read. And two of the other things that I really wanted to talk about with this book that everybody needs to read, because I mean, you get so much for your money on this. I mean, this is like over 300 pages of just well documented stuff. I mean, this isn't just conjecture. I mean, you guys are very thorough in the information you give. So I think, it's well worth the money. But I want to talk about ghosts. That
Yeah.
one, I have a Christian background. Now, I was raised Catholic. So, I was like confirmed in the church and everything. Currently, I'm non-denominational, but I am always searching. I'm always making sure to listen to other people and what everybody has to say, because I think once close, I mean, obviously you want to be careful about, the other beliefs, but within the realm of my faith system. I mean, so I was kind of always taught in the background, at not in Catholicism, they believe in purgatory. They actually would say that ghosts exist, but they obviously have an explanation for that. But we were, I was always taught that if you see an entity, it's a demon. It's always a demon, because you're absent from the body, present with the Lord, is what they always say. They always point to that one scripture. But in your book, you actually give other biblical documentation for the existence of a spirit realm that might actually include other spirits. So I wanted you to talk about that because that fascinated me. So are there ghosts? Is there a spirit realm aside? Are there, and if so, where are they coming from? Are they the my thought was, are they the part of the cloud of witnesses? And this can even get into like the quantum aspect of this, because one of the thoughts I thought too after you explain it is that you guys talk about God existing, or Jesus, and existing outside of time, and obviously that's an explanation you'll have to give. I don't want to go too into my theory until you give that, because I would lose people. So go into ghosts, and then I want you to talk about about existing outside, how time was a construct made for us essentially, and then I'll remind me to give you my theory on that whole thing. So go for it.
All right.
Tell
Sounds
everybody.
good. Well, the interesting thing, or the thing that we have to establish first, is the Bible only says a little bit about this. So a lot of it is speculation, which is fine. I love
Sure.
speculation. And as long as the speculations line up with the rest of the Bible, then hey, a lot of times that's the best we can do. And actually that's a lot of the best that ancient people could do too, even ancient Hebrews. So there are instances in the Bible that don't only suggest, but I think outright prove that first century Jews and Jews before did believe in ghosts of some kind. Now, what the specific rules are on how like the ghost world works, I don't think that I don't think it's at all the way that like contemporary American 21st century interpretation of the spirit realm with psychics like I don't know, Sylvia Browne or the Long Island woman.
Yeah.
I don't think it works the way they say. I think what happens with them is they see spirits and then they interpret it and piece it together in their own minds, and they kind of construct how it works this way because this is how I saw it, and but again, that would be like going to another country, visiting for an hour, and then trying to find out, trying to construct what their legal system must be, what their history must be, what all their laws are. It's just impossible.
And then you have their subjective perception basically from it. So
exactly. And so, but there are reasons to believe that there are these things. So, like in the Greek New Testament, there's a couple different words for different types of spirit beings. There's I think it's phantasma or something for ghosts, but this isn't fallen angels. This isn't angels or anything like that, because there's another Greek word for that, and that's angelos. And then there's even a different word for demons. So these are not, and there's a different one for Satan himself. So these are not the same types of beings. And I was raised like you, where I was raised to that ghosts are all demons. And again, it's this really reductive thing. And I think that whole thing started because for some reason, a lot of mainstream Christianity, decades, hundreds of years ago, decided that the gospel would be more palatable to people if we take the supernatural out of it, with the rise of Darwinism and atheism and all. Atheism is actually a pretty new thing, by the standards of the
But
rest of the.
even during like the Age of Enlightenment and all that, I mean, I know that the church actually really they did used to believe in the Nephilim as the sons of God, and then they actually like decided to change it. Oh no, that's just the sons of Seth. Everywhere in the Bible it says the sons of God, and that always means angels. But except for this one time when the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were beautiful and took them for themselves. Now all of a sudden that's the line of Seth, because no way would an angel do that. That's just too weird.
Yeah, they've naturalized everything, and people talk about the Jefferson Bible where he ripped out all the miracles and stuff like that, and and it's funny because a lot of Christians will criticize that, but then a lot of Christians do basically the same thing today. They take out the supernatural, and they in churches like you and I grew up in, they'll say that this stuff doesn't really happen now. But anyway, so they did have a belief in ghosts, and there's examples. I mean, even when Jesus was walking on the water, they wondered if it was a ghost. And when you actually look in the Greek, it's the word for ghost, not for angel or demon or any. It's just ghost. And now what they thought of as a ghost is probably a little different than what we think of as a ghost, and we don't really know the exact level of difference there because we're just not given a lot of information about it. I mean, it would be safe to say they thought ghosts were the spirits of dead people, but exactly how that worked, there's just not a whole lot of information that we know.
When I was reading this, a thought popped in my head, and it was just a quick thought. It's nothing I would hang my hat on per se, but the Bible does talk about the cloud of witnesses. And I did read a book, a kid who had it's an amazing book. He's a kid who had profound autism. Like his parents were told he would never be able to communicate. So the mom was working with him. He was about 8 years old, and she was just trying to get an iPad out to have him spell the word red. She had it right in front of him on a cue card or something like that, a word like that. And so she put the iPad in front of him and asked if he could do it. And he typed out, "God is a good gift giver." And she's like, "Wait, what? What just happened here?" Then he started typing all of these complex messages. The book's called Josiah's Fire. I mean, stuff that there's no way he could know. Then he started talking about ancestors, relatives, and very specific things that he couldn't, like, she could not figure out how he's communicating like this. So finally the mom was like, "Josiah, where are you learning to do this?" And she's like, he typed out that Jesus comes and takes him to heaven at night and teaches him the order of sound. And he also says that he sees his relatives up there. And he said, "Mom," he said, they can see what we're doing here, and that they still intervene up there for us in prayer. Like they still pray up there to Jesus, to God. So they're up there like intervening in prayer for us down here." And so essentially I was thinking that sounds like the cloud of witnesses that the Bible refers to. So my thought was, I wonder if, and because they exist outside of time, and they can jump around, like, I know that, and you can go into that in a second, but, past, present, and future are happening at the same time and people, time was constructed for us down here. So I always thought, maybe there's some, they're actually witnessing what's going on here. And so maybe that's why we're not supposed to talk to them. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things going on with that. Definitely, there are passages in the Bible that talk about, like people under the throne of God asking, how long, Lord, until you take vengeance on these people? We're being killed, and the people, the martyrs down there, the Christians are being killed and stuff. How long are you going to wait? So it does seem like now that vision was given to John, and John wasn't dead at the time. He might have been in or out of the body, we don't know, but he wasn't dead. He lived for a while after that. So he was a normal, like, human being. And the only way to really convey a message to a human being has to involve time, because if it was outside of time, how could he possibly explain that? I can't imagine what reality, like, without time, outside of time. I can't imagine what that would be like. And so part of me wonders, because there are things in Revelation that talks about, like, there was silence for a space of half an hour. How literally do we take that? Is it literally that there is a 30-minute span happening in heaven, or is it that John experienced it that way because he's still human and that's the only framework that he has? And so
Gotcha.
I don't know the answer
Sure.
to that. But what I do believe is that when we leave this world, if we're in Christ, if we're saved when we die, I do
Mhm.
believe that we're taken into eternity with him. We are. Well, actually, I think it's more kind of like we wake up and realize we were already there in eternity, because Ephesians 2 first says that we were dead in our sins, but when we accepted Christ, that we were raised and seated with him in heaven. So that's past tense language. It's not a metaphor. There's no like or as for
It's literal.
similes.
Yeah.
It's literal and it's past tense. And so that that tells me, well, when I look around, I'm not in heaven right now. I'm in my basement. I'm in my studio.
Hmm.
So but it's the Bible, so I know it's true. So what does that mean? And I don't think it's good enough to say, well, it's just an analogy. I don't think it is, because it's really literal, specific language. And I think what happens is something that can't really be explained in human terms, but it's something like when we're saved at that time in the spirit world, God does actually raise us up to sit with him in heaven and in our new bodies and all of that stuff. So in a sense, you're here, but you're there too at the same time. And this is why I
That's so
don't.
trippy.
Well, and it gets even weirder, because this is why I don't think that if there are ghosts, I don't think that people who are in Christ, our dead relatives, they probably pray for us in heaven, which
Hmm.
again, I don't know how that,
Sure.
but I don't think they're intervening in our lives, because to them, we're
Sure.
already there with them. We've already made it.
Mm.
So we're already with all of our dead
Oh,
relatives. So
wow.
what would they be intervening for? We're
True.
already there. And because
Well,
I
could it be that maybe since they can step outside of time, because you can go back and maybe like almost watch your life. I know you get reviews, life reviews up there. I wonder if what we're seeing is them, is them coming in, they're popping in and out of time almost. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. You could be watching, and there's even prophecies that are really weird that show one that I know of, one or maybe two examples of something just like that. So Ezekiel, he sees a vision, and this was 2,600 years ago.
Hmm.
Ezekiel sees a vision of a man measuring the temple. So John, or no, excuse me, Ezekiel. Hang on, I'm getting this mixed up now.
That cold game.
Did Ezekiel measure the temple, or did John? Um,
Oh man, I can't remember.
okay, I think people who are watching, I'm getting over a
Sure.
cold, so
He's getting over the corona.
I'm getting over coronavirus. It's fried my brain. Um, but okay, let me think about this for a minute. Okay, so it was he's okay. I
I'm
think
almost thinking it would John. I don't think it would have been John. I don't think it was John. That sounds like,
John the Revelator.
yeah.
He did he measure the temple? One of them saw someone measure the temple,
Right,
and one of them
right.
measured the temple. But
Uh-huh.
there was a span of hundreds of years in between.
Wait. Now that's going to be your question to get into heaven now, right? Who was it?
Yeah,
Help me.
exactly. Which one was it?
You're out of here. You're out of here. You couldn't answer that.
You're gonna get a bunch of comments on here, and they're all gonna be the same thing, saying which one it was. But
Right. They're
but
gonna and they know they looked it up, but they're gonna act like they didn't.
yeah, exactly. And I probably should just look it up. It'd take me 2 seconds. But anyway, but the point being that in one of the visions, one of them actually was commanded to measure the temple. I think Ezekiel saw someone measure the temple, and I think John measured it. I think.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Let's just go with that. And if I'm wrong, then people can just flip the
They
names.
will correct
But
us
so
for sure.
Ezekiel gets a vision 2,600 years ago. He sees this person measuring the future temple. Oh, strange. That's cool. And so he records that. Now, John the Revelator, hundreds of years later, he gets a vision. And in the vision, God tells him, measure this temple. And so when you're reading that and you read those two together, you realize that was John the whole time. John, and imagine how mind-blowing that must have been for John. John grew up reading these stories, reading the accounts of Ezekiel.
Oh yeah, and then it's him.
That's him. Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing. And even weirder
Yeah.
than that, Ezekiel would have been with God at the time, because this would have been after his death,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So Ezekiel probably would have been able to witness John for a second time now, actually
Right.
measure the temple. So there you get that duality, the living Ezekiel
Sure.
in his own time, but then the dead, reborn,
Yes.
or not reborn, but rejuvenated,
Yes.
rebodied
Right.
Ezekiel watching it from a heavenly vantage point. So there's all sorts of, there's another one with Jesus and Moses, and this one is speculative. Like, I can't prove this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's one of those that it would be cool if it's true.
Sure.
So Moses, it says that Moses went up to the mountain, met with God, and got the Ten Commandments and
Hmm.
stuff like that. He went up and met with God. No one was with Moses when this happened. It was just him.
Hmm.
Well, then, so Jesus, he also goes up a mountain. Now it's not. There's nothing to suggest it's the same mountain. It seems like it's Mount Hermon, and then whichever side of the argument you fall on where Moses was. But
Hmm.
there's a couple different candidates. But if we're talking about transversing time and space, what if we know at the Transfiguration we see Moses there?
Hmm.
What if that was because right after Moses came down from the mountain, his face was shining, right? So
Yes.
saw Moses, because it doesn't actually say, it just says it was Moses. It's not
Hmm.
super specific as what version of Moses. What if,
Yeah.
and the big what if them seeing Moses, that was actually Moses at the mountain meeting with
Getting the time.
God, which is
Yes.
Jesus, Jesus, God in the flesh. And that was what Jesus was doing with Moses there. And that's why Moses came back with a shining face, because he was actually at this transfiguration event.
Wow.
Which
Past and future happening kind of at the
yeah,
same time.
I
Yeah.
can't prove it. I can't even
Sure.
say there's strong evidence for it, but it is strange that the descriptions of Jesus during the transfiguration, of Moses with the shining face, are very similar, so much that they couldn't even look at him. I mean, they're really
Wow.
similar. So I think some kind of weird
Something
time
went
thing is
through.
happening there. So I
Well,
think when, yeah,
then you have the two witnesses. I mean, if you believe, I personally believe it's Enoch and Elijah, because they were the two that were taken up. I mean, some say they think it could be Moses, one of the witnesses, but it would make sense. There were two prophets back, in before, in the Old Testament, that were essentially raptured up. They were taken up, and then they said in the end times during tribulations, they're going to be here witnessing to us. So, of course, when I first read that when I was younger, it's like, oh man, where they been hanging out for like these thousands of years, like just sitting there, sitting under a tree waiting for him to call them up. All right, guys, let's go, but no, like he took them outside, and they probably went straight from there. I mean, obviously, again, you can't say for sure, but they probably went straight from there, and he probably put them right straight in the future, because he can pull them out of time and put them somewhere else. It reminds me of like editing clips, like just cut it here and put it over here. I mean,
yeah,
it's crazy
exactly.
to think, but these are the things that people don't know. Like the Bible does address that. That is solid teaching that time was made for us. So, because
Yeah.
in the very end, when he creates the new heaven and the new earth, there will be no sun or moon. The sun and moon were created for us to designate time. So, to look for the signs in the suns, the moon, and the stars. And, obviously that's how we calculate our days and in the feast days and the holy days and all that. So, I mean,
Yeah, and
it is.
I think that's why we know so little about the afterlife too, is because it is in eternity. So people, just so people are clear about the distinction here, eternity is outside of time. Infinity is time never ending. So we're not promised infinity, because people think, well, wouldn't heaven get boring after a while? We're just up there praising Jesus the whole time. Well, we're going to be doing more than that, but it's not
Right.
time infinity. It's not
Hmm.
time infinite. It's time eternal. It's outside of time. So it's not like
Hmm.
we're going to be there a million years. We'll just be there, and we can't understand that right now. I think that's
Sure.
why we know so little about the afterlife, is because we how can it be explained to us in a way that we would even be able to really understand? The best way is just give limited information, but give the stuff that you
Right.
need to know to get there. You need to know about Jesus to get there.
Right.
And
Well,
then
and then this, again, this goes into like you're unraveling the multiverse. I mean, a lot of even physics
yeah,
types of stuff go into this. So, I mean, that's something again we'll talk about in the future because, some people are like, how is this? I mean, if you read his book in Unraveling the Multiverse, right? That's yeah, unraveling or that's it, right?
yep,
Unraveling the
unraveling the
multiverse. Yeah.
multiverse.
You explain a lot of this and even that, like I said, this is stuff that we just never were told. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the stuff, and not everybody's an expert. I mean, obviously,
Well,
a preacher can't always, but you can bring people in, and you can,
exactly. You want to know
mhm,
something funny?
what?
I have never, not once, no, wait, actually, I take that back. One time, ever. But actually, this was for a conference, so I'm not really counting it. I have never, not a single time been invited to come and speak at a church. Not once. Not unless it was a conference being held at a church. That then, but
Wow.
to just go and speak on like a Sunday morning, that I have never been invited. There are people who can talk about these kinds of things that Christians would probably want to know, but
Mhm.
we get shut out, and that's the case with a lot of us
Why?
other speakers.
Why are they shutting you out?
I think some of it is ego. I think some of it is the pastor doesn't want to be made to look stupid. Like I got to bring in this guy to even talk about something because I just have no clue. And nobody would think that. But
No.
when somebody's kind of ego driven,
Hmm.
they think people are going to think that. I think it's part that. I think they're worried about what their congregation is going to think. It's too weird, so their congregation might not like it. When actually, all the evidence suggests they're going to love it.
Right. How can it be weird
People,
though? Jesus, God made all of this. I mean, this is
yeah,
his creation. If you don't like it, then you're gonna probably have some. I mean, what are you
yeah,
gonna
and
do when
that's
like?
the other thing because it doesn't fall perfectly in line with their traditional interpretation of the Bible, and because of that, they think this stuff conflicts with the Bible. It doesn't. It conflicts with their really basic like interpretation
Yes.
of it that they're giving their
Mhm.
so you're never going to see like L.A. Marzulli at a Joel Osteen speaking at a Joel Osteen church or something. Actually, the most theologically sound person that's ever spoken there was Kanye West. I mean, how mind-blowing is that?
Right. Wow. Woo, that's an interesting point. I
Yeah.
mean, God bless Kanye, but he's newer, he's fresh to this. So, I mean,
Yeah,
gee,
yeah,
yeah.
and that was that, and I watched it, and that was the most theologically sound thing I had ever heard come out of Joel Osteen's church.
Sure.
And it's not
Sure.
something I watch every day, so
Yes,
people can hit me
right,
on
right.
that. I haven't
Yes.
watched every.
You watched Joel Osteen?
Yeah, but I've seen enough. I kind of get his. I get his
Yeah,
groove. I see what he's doing, but
sure.
I
Sure.
mean, even Kanye West was saying, yeah, they'll purposely put symbolism in stuff in entertainment industries. You guys can look that up later and stuff, and
And
you're
yeah,
never
that's
hearing
the
that stuff.
thing. That's what's crazy. Like they'll sit there, these are the same people that will actually sit there and watch even like the Marvel universe. Oh, Doctor Strange, that's awesome. And it's like, yeah, like the Bible actually talks about no, 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 don't bring that here. We want to keep that in Marvel. Like, keep that in the movie theater, man. Don't bring that stuff here,
Yeah,
like it
exactly.
doesn't
Or
make any
like, yeah,
sense.
Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. I mean, all of this stuff is like really entertaining, and it's like, but pastors don't realize like this. There's a lot of this in the Bible, and you can connect it with the culture of today and say, okay, Thor. Who actually was Thor? Was he
Right.
possibly an offspring of this Genesis 6 thing that happened? But you're never going to get that in church, even though people would love it.
Yes.
People would really, and it's not about entertainment, but people would actually feel like they're getting spiritually fed. That there is a reason this stuff is really pervasive in our culture, and there's a reason that people enjoy it so much. There's a reason that Marvel movies are so popular. It's because it's a callback to some really ancient stuff in human history that was cataclysmic and actually happened. And this goes
Well,
into a whole other thing, but I kind
yeah,
of
but
believe there's genetic memory and stuff like that.
right. Oh yeah, I do too. They're actually discovering that right now. We should talk
Yeah.
about that sometime too. But the thing is, the ancient world, everybody believed in an afterlife. Every
Yes.
culture had their own forms. It was when everything, you take everything and then you filtered it through essentially what the westernized everything. They stripped it all. They totally stripped all of the spirituality out of everything. So now if you believed in stuff, it was like ridiculous, like watching a magic show. It wasn't real. It's sleight of hand. It's whatever. That stuff didn't really happen. And then they're myths, and then all of a sudden you're taught it was a myth. Well, it might not have been as mythological as you think, and then now you're starting to see they actually, I just watched a show last night, and up in the Alaska Triangle, they have a triangle up there like the Bermuda, and they found giant bones up there during World War II, like
Mhm.
massive skulls, massive giants. And then there's tales of, like there's cultures out there that still won't go in certain parts of the woods up there because they believe they're still there. They'll tell you people will disappear up there and they've seen them. But then, you see these mainstream news articles from the 1800s, but then they just disappear. So they're subverting it, they're hiding it, and if the church doesn't address this, then they're kind of complicit if they don't
Yeah,
actually look into this. You're complicit in allowing them to strip the spirituality out of it. Then again, you have kids now who they grew up with Marvel, they grew up and they want to watch Harry Potter, and they've got all this other stuff going on, and they're going to leave. They're going to
they
leave because
will.
they're like, oh, my religion tells me that God's going to point his finger at me. And if I do this, I can come to heaven. And if I can't, they just strip it down to just this horrible base, like theology.
And they're going to find something like New Age that makes them promises. I mean, I grew up on like superhero cartoons like Batman and Spider-Man and all that stuff, X-Men.
Same.
And as a kid, like any other boy growing up, as a little kid, I always thought it'd be cool to have superpowers. So when the New Age thing happened, it was like a callback to that. It was like
Yeah,
my childlike excitement, and I fell right in with it. Your kids are going to have the same things if you don't tell them what all this is.
exactly.
If they think of that, and you don't have to tell them, you don't have to say like, well, Doctor Strange is just absolute evil, and you shouldn't watch it, and you shouldn't, I mean, you don't have to
Right,
be like that. But what
right.
I do with my kids, and I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent or anything, but this is what I find that works. Like if we watch something, and my kids, I'm selective on which Marvel movies and which
Sure.
kids even. But
Mhm.
like I won't have them watch Doctor Strange for one because there's too much in there to explain that they're too young to really get,
Sure,
and I
sure.
don't I don't want them thinking ooh magic and then that's all they
Right,
understand.
right.
Um, but like Spider-Man or whatever.
Yeah.
But we'll tell them, did you know that actually these like Thor or whatever, these are based on myths that actually have a history to them. And our kids know about
Hmm.
Genesis 6 and all of that, and so we can tell them, the Bible says this is the real story. So in real life, these weren't actually good guys at all.
Right.
These were pretty rough dudes.
Hmm.
And the kids they get so excited about it because
Hmm.
there is something in them where they get more excited about that than they do a movie because it's real and they know
Yes.
it's real. There's again, I don't know if it's a genetic memory thing or what it is, but there is something that's why around 2011, 2012, I was one of actually a very large group of people that joined the church, that came back into the church because of Nephilim stuff that was being talked about. Nephilim stuff
Hmm.
had been talked about for a long time, but for some reason, that time frame, 2011,
Really.
2012, yeah. If you ask people, if you ask anybody like in our fringe community,
Hmm.
anybody that hasn't been doing this for years,
Hmm.
if you ask them how did you get into it, 99% of them will say it was because I found out who the Nephilim were. And a
Wow.
lot of them will say it was around that time frame, around 2011, 2012, within like a 4-year period, somewhere around
Hmm.
there. That's when people really got into it, and I was one of them. I don't know that I believe that was a move of the Holy Spirit. I think God was
Sure.
doing something. Maybe it was a response to all the Mayan 2012 stuff that was going on,
Right.
because that
Could be.
created a lot of New Agers at that time too.
Absolutely.
So
That
maybe,
that's really interesting. I mean, yeah, I didn't realize that, but yeah, I mean, and I do think something shifted around that time. I mean, definitely just like now, like 2020 hit, and it's like people that I even know that normally aren't like overtly spiritual, they're like, dude, like something feels different. They're like something's like
yeah,
going
yeah,
on
and
right
people
now,
are
you
getting more
know?
political. People are even getting
Yeah.
more political now. I mean, and that was another shift that happened right around Trump. And I don't think it was just Trump. I don't
Yeah.
think it was just because we've
Oh,
had we've had weird presidents, and we've
yeah.
had weird.
I mean,
But
let's face it, not as much of a character as Trump. I mean, that guy is
yeah,
he he
that's
says
true.
what everybody's thinking, doesn't he?
Exactly. But isn't
A
it
lot of
weird
times.
that it's like it's this time that we get someone like that? It's this time that the political climate. I was never interested in politics until Trump was starting to gain some traction. And for a while I just thought it was funny, and I was like, I got to watch this because he's
Yeah.
hilarious. And but I didn't care about politics. But it was through that I started getting really interested in it, and I started actually talking about it and doing stuff in public about it and stuff like that.
I mean, say what you want, but like, whatever side of the fence you're on, when Trump leaves, it's going to get pretty boring.
Yeah, it's at least going to get boring. It was funny because I was
They're
joking
back to doing this again with their hand, and I'll tell you what, no new taxes, or 90% taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
But before we get to I wanted to address the last thing in this because I know I'm sure people are like, oh man, ADD setting in. But like doppelgangers, you brought up doppelgangers, and I'm telling you, when I saw that, I was like, whoa. So I have this weird phenomenon happen to me all the time. It's happened to me all the time. I'll go places and people that I know will either say they saw me somewhere. Hey, I saw you at dinner the other night. I was going to come say I wasn't at dinner the other night. I was home at this specific night. I never go out. Or they would say, I know you from somewhere. I know you. Were you at such and such a place? Yes. No, I know you. Why do I know you? I mean, it happens everywhere. It happens at church. It happens in the store. It happens when it's just everywhere. So like, I don't know. It just, this whole doppelganger thing, when you brought it up, I was like, I wonder if there's something to that. I mean, I kind of hope not because of what it means, but.
Well, what I think is going on here, I think there's like a biological part of it, but there's also a spiritual part. So on the biology side, there's only a certain number, there's a finite number of configurations the human face can have. And with what are we up to? 20 billion people on the earth? No, it's like 7 or 8.
Right.
But with billions of people on the earth, you're just gonna have people that look identical who aren't even related, and that's just a statistical thing. So with that there, I don't think there's anything mystical about it. But there is an ancient this belief in ancient spirit doubles. It's so old we don't know. We can't track it back to its origin. And wow. Every religion has some form of this, which is so strange. Now, I believe, like, you asked the question earlier, how do these other religions, get this stuff about the afterlife? I believe in what Dr. Michael Heiser calls the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. So basically what that is, Deuteronomy 32 in the King James, it says that God divided up the nations according to the number of the sons of Israel. It doesn't make sense because at that time when God divided up the nations, which was the Tower of Babel, there was no Israel yet. That came later. That's actually a mistranslation. And it should be according to the number of the sons of God. So things like ESV and some others, they'll have according to the number of the sons of God. So basically, there's a lot with this that you could talk for hours about, but basically what it boils down to is during the time of the Tower of Babel, all these people, the whole people of the world, they weren't following God, and they actually wanted to go back to honoring their other gods that they had before the flood that they had heard about from their grandfather Noah or whatever. They stopped believing in God. They stopped believing that he was a good God, and and we get this from some extra biblical stuff too, but their motivations were, they didn't believe in the stories of Noah anymore. They believed in what Nimrod was saying, that God is actually evil. We need to go up into heaven. We need to kill him, and we need to replace him with the old gods, because God's the one that sent the flood. So he's the evil one, and these other guys, we want to worship them. And when
people hear the story of the Tower of Babel, they think, oh, look at how stupid your Bible is. Your people actually thought they could build a tower to heaven, and it's like, that's not really what was going on.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not the point. And we don't even know how they were planning on getting to, because all it says is reach into heaven. So that doesn't necessarily mean height, but also even that part in the King James, it's in italics, meaning it was added, it was inferred in later. So the original Hebrew doesn't even say that. It just says somehow through this tower they were planning on entering heaven. And then it just kind of morphed over time that it was the height. But it wouldn't necessarily be that. It could have been a lot
portal or
So who knows? It was probably some kind of occultic ritual thing that they were trying to do. But however they were planning on doing it, they believed that they could. So God saw what was going on, and he said, all right, we got to do something about this. Otherwise, they could actually do something here. And we don't know the extent of it. I mean, God says something like everything they imagine to do, they'll be able to achieve. So God was worried that something was actually going to happen. And so God split them all up, changed their languages around. That's when he divided up the nations. But the part that gets lost is that it was basically like he said, all right, you want to worship these other false gods, these other fallen angels, have at it. They are yours. You belong to them now. So God not only divided up the nations, but like Deuteronomy 38 says, he divided up the nations according to the sons of God, meaning the divine council that Mike Heiser talks about, his angels. And so he put these angels in charge over these nations, but the angels, either before or after this event, we don't know, but the angels became corrupt and they started teaching these false religions. They started teaching the people that they were over to worship them instead of God. That's why you have all these different religions. But that's also why they all kind of seem to tie together in some way. They have common elements. They all believe in some type of afterlife, and there's like common elements of it. It's because while fallen angels, these angels, they're not omnipotent. They're not they don't know everything. They know a lot, but they don't know everything. They certainly know more about their world than we do. So that's why you have these common elements that they would tell people, and they would make some stuff up too. But they would, every story is based on some level of truth. So that's how all these religions got started. So somewhere in there, is this belief about ancient spirit doubles, and this is one of the things. Just like you can find the flood in every religious story. You can find ancient spirit doubles in every religious story. We know the origin of the flood, but ancient spirit double, we don't know. It is a big mystery, which to me is really awesome. Like that.
Yeah, no kidding. I know I know. That's awesome.
So the way that it goes is we get this in the Bible, so we know the ancient Hebrews had this too. We get this in the Bible. It was an established belief. Acts 12 through 15 reads, and this was after, well, I'll just read it. When he realized this, he went into the house of Mary, the mother of John. This is after Peter's jailbreak. So Peter, the angel lets Peter out of jail. Peter runs to, the house, and he's trying to get in and stuff, and he's knocking at the gate or whatever. So when he realized this, this is talking about whoever saw Peter, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying. And when he knocked at the door of the gateway, talking about Peter, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. So Peter's knocking at the gateway, and the servant girl Rhoda comes to answer. Recognizing Peter's voice, in her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran in and reported that Peter was standing in the gate. They said to her, "You are out of your mind," but she kept insisting it was so, and they kept saying, it is his angel. Now, what's weird about this, they didn't believe that this was Peter's ghost, that Peter had died in prison and this is his ghost. Because the Hebrew word there is angelos, which is Hebrew for angel, for a spirit being that wasn't human before. It wasn't phantasma, which would have been ghost. So they weren't saying that's his ghost, he died, he needs to move on. They weren't saying that. They were saying that it was his angel. Now, what does that mean? So I talked to Michael Heiser about this in an interview, and he said there's actually this history that there was a belief in ancient Hebrew, and you get little hints of it in the Bible, but it wasn't widely written about. But there was this belief that everybody had some type of spirit double, basically, that looked exactly like you. And there was some contention on if these things were good or evil. Today we sort of think of like doppelgangers, and so we think of them as evil. But there were some that believed that they were like it's sort of like your guardian angel, but they look like you, and they're there to help you. And it was like they knew that there was an existence of a spirit double, but the details they didn't really know. So not a whole lot of it made it in the Bible. Really, that's all we get. All we get is just that they believed in it. And
wouldn't it be awesome if that was true and they could go to work for you?
Yeah, no kidding. And
just I don't feel like going.
Other religions as well, they had the same belief, but they weren't as responsible with it as the Hebrews. So the Hebrews, they knew they didn't know anything beyond that these things existed. That's why you don't find it in the Bible. only in this one part, and the only thing that you learn is that they had a belief in spirit doubles.
Mhm.
That's all you know. So the Hebrews were really responsible about the religious texts and stuff. Other religions not so much. So other religions, like we have in here Islam, and we list out all these other religions that had a
Mhm.
belief in spirit doubles. They had the same kind of belief, but throughout time they added to it. It got twisted around. Like the Germans came up with doppelganger stuff.
Yeah.
Muslims came up with I forget what it was called. I have it written down here, but they have a name for it,
Mhm.
and they incorporated it into their religion. And there's two spirit ideas in others.
Man,
So
it would
we
be really interesting to know like the origins of that, that
yeah,
someone that they actually believe that there could be something that looks like you out there that's not you.
it would be. And for all we know, there could be some lost text that'll get discovered someday about it. But as
Mhm.
far as what's available now, the closest to an origin that we can get is basically that. Like there's
Okay.
other things, but the other things are more common commentary on the belief and not
Mm,
describing the belief itself. So
okay.
it'd be like how I wrote this book, and I added some commentary on what it might.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I did that, but that's not gospel truth. That's just kind of what I think. So there are some things, and we list them in the book. There's like Valentinus from 100 to 170 A.D. He was a Gnostic, which Gnosticism is not compatible
Yeah.
with Christianity, but
Mhm.
he had an idea about how this worked. Tatian, he had an idea about how this worked too. This was somewhere around the first century, I believe. And so there were actually, yeah, okay, Irenaeus. So a lot of these
Mhm.
ancient thinkers did have like ideas about it, but that's all they
Sure.
are. So we haven't been able to find any really good source material for what God's actual reason for having a spirit double. And it also made me think about how this we're already in heaven kind of thing. Is
Mhm.
it possible that we're actually like this is actually a version of us? But like okay, so in
Mm,
Peter's case, while it's an angel, it's not phantasma, as in this is not his dead spirit, but could
right.
be his glorified self. Although that might be a
Right.
different Greek word, because when we get our glorified bodies, we're not angels. We might have the job of messenger though, so that might
Mhm.
utilize
Wow,
angelic.
that's an interesting
Yeah,
thought.
there's so many question marks about it. Like there's so much
Right.
not known about it,
I
but
mean, again, could it be us popping in time or something and popping back out, or is
yeah,
that,
that's
I
what I'm
mean,
saying. That's what I'm saying. It might
yeah,
be in our glorified
yeah,
bodies. We're seated with Christ. We're outside of time, and
right.
who knows what the process of if we review our lives, how that works. Are we actually like viewing it from inside or outside? Is it like a TV screen, or is it like a play on a stage where you're actually
Right.
interacting? Who knows? We're not really given any
Does
information
he
on
take
how it
you
works.
like, maybe he takes you like, the Ebenezer Scrooge story
Right.
where he takes
Right.
you and you're actually watching it, like play back out because you can pop back in time and kind of watch it.
Could be,
So,
and it could even be something like time might not be always a completely straight line. There are people who have claimed they've seen their older selves just for a split second or a couple of seconds. They've
mm,
seen themselves doing something at an older age, and then once they reach that age, they remember they
I
remember it
did
after the
this.
fact,
I
but
remember
they
that. Yeah.
remember that they saw exactly this thing, but by the time they look to see if their younger self is there, it's done.
It's gone.
So
Wow.
um,
Bizarre.
it's
Bizarre.
weird. So there might be. Time is so mysterious. We don't know if it could bend and loop in
Mhm.
certain areas. I mean, space does that. Space definitely does that. Why not time? So who knows?
I tell you, the one thing that I do know is that studying all this stuff is that our world is definitely a lot stranger than what we've been told, isn't it?
That's
I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
I mean that's a good use of the internet. We would be in the dark about a lot of this stuff. I mean, I would have eaten this stuff. Even I know, even as a kid, I would probably have been looking this stuff up because I was the kid that literally was like reading newspapers in elementary school, like when the TWA hostage flight situation happened. I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember hearing about that or whatever, but I mean, I was literally the kid that I was cutting out the articles and I was
Mhm.
putting them like I was collecting I don't know why I
Oh
did
wow.
that. I was a weird child, I guess. I was confused, but
I was too.
yeah. Well, it has been so wonderful talking to you. I mean, we got so much done, and yeah, I feel like I could talk to you for probably 20 more hours about, quantum physics and the multiverse and all this stuff. So we're gonna have to definitely have you back on and go
Absolutely, I'd
over.
love to.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about the multiverse and all that. So let's set up a time to do that and talk. There, I definitely have tons of questions still. So
Awesome. I'll have to have you on my show sometime too. But yeah,
that
thank you for
would be
having me on.
awesome.
It's been a blast. I love your show, and I love what you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having you back on. Yeah, this is a great conversation. It's lots of fun. So I will be talking with you soon. And everybody, again, Josh Peck, go get his book on Amazon, Afterlife. He also has other books out there too, like I said, Unraveling the Multiverse. And go check his show out on Skywatch TV. And I mean, he's go check out Daily Renegade on YouTube. There's just lots of good stuff there. So we'll talk to you soon, Josh. Thanks.
Have a great day.